If people want to change like drug problems in Appalachia and poverty and education problems here in Appalachia, and they really want to make a difference in Appalachia, then you know there better be an economy to back this all up. If there's no economy, we're not going to change anything because that's what's been the case for the last 50 years. If you look at projects in Appalachia, they're multifaceted. If you want to talk about managing land and changing the community, you're talking about social, environmental, and ecological in a holistic picture. The amount of people that could go into those pictures, I mean, the amount of professionals I could hire at any given minute to go into these jobs. I could hire sociologists, I could hire teacher sociologists, I could hire hydrologists, I could hire geologists, I mean, there's a multitude of people I could put down here to work. And that's just the people who are professionals in academia and industry. But then if you talk about the community, you could, between road building and all the infrastructure work and between all the like reforestation work, building new habitat corridors for animals, reestablishing some of these populations of animals from these mountains, you could build a multitude of industries up here if people put their imagination to work. And the problem I'm saying is that imagination meets the brick wall of reality every day up here in Appalachia, where it's just the reality is poverty. Poverty is a dirty word, and it's not fun to talk about on the Congress floor because no one wants to do anything about it. So, until people want to deal with like poverty, then we're just going to be doing this all around and around and around. And it's going to be sad when people like me who have nothing have to come up here and do something to make a difference. I mean, I got nothing, so it's like, it's fine for me though. I'd rather do that than not. My name is Jonathan Chase. I'm affiliated with the Woodland Community Land Trust. I lease land here from them, and I work for the Land Trust for a horticultural project. I live in Knoxville right now, but I'm moving in 2 weeks to this location we're standing at right now. This location is on Kings Lane up on the Land Trust. It's an abandoned mine land piece of property that the Land Trust owns and has built houses on. There was originally 1, 2, 3, 4 homes on this 40-acre site. 2 of them have burnt down over the years, and one of the places where it's burnt down has become our first research area for building models. The Land Trust acquired it 20 years now ago, maybe in the early 2000s. But the land originally was mined as a strip mine and abandoned in 1976, but I think by the Diamond Coal Company, which long ago doesn't exist now. I mean, they're long defunct, but there was a 40-acre strip mine here, a smaller mine that was built on an old shaft mine. So there was old dog mines back up in there where local landowners would have actually taken the family and worked into small shafts into the mining with a horse, or a small mule, and pulled out a little bit of coal, and then eventually it was stripped to get the big mine out of it, and then left in '76. My mom's side of the family comes from Coretta, West Virginia, which is also a coal mining area. My oldest brother, he was an Episcopalian minister. He met Tanya Brookman, who is the Land Trust manager. My brother introduced Tanya to my father. My father came up here and worked here for 20 years, volunteering, and built a daycare center, built a dormitory down in White Oak, tried to find funding and raising interest into the area for the Land Trust. In 2007, I came up here for the first time. And then I guess in around 2012 came up with this idea to try to build an industry here, a horticultural industry here, to try to manufacture jobs and an income for people and more attention. The project was started from looking at post-Soviet Czechoslovakian areas and looking at some of their old tin and copper mines where they were actually moonscapes. And the Czechoslovakian government went into this idea of supporting local farmers to go into this hydroponic production on top of this land that was useless. They got a 2-year kind of grant for doing that, and they wrote some papers out of it. But I got a hand on one of those papers, and so that just tripped my imagination. And I was like, well, here we've got communities of people who are out of work. You've got like acres, I mean, as many acres as you want of land that's not used, is unusable. I'm a hydroponic grower by nature. I mean, that's what I went to school for. So I was like, well, we can work above the soils and, try to develop that. But this is basically, unconsolidated mine tailings. So when the head walls collapsed and they put the drag lines to the top of the head walls, they push all the soils and everything that's been come down, the aggregate, the topsoils, any small clay fractions, any fraction of the soil gets pushed into the valley, and thus is valley fill. And this is what it becomes. It looks just like this. It's really rocky and unconsolidated. It has no organic matter in it whatsoever. But I like to call it a prime soil because In the aggregates, there's colloids that can attract nitrates and carbon, and once those kind of minerals and ionic structures are added to these soils, they respond rapidly. And so I think in the end, what was waste could be returned to something actually very useful again to people, to be grown on and developed. It's but you can see it's marbled. It has, there's certain kinds of gray clays and red clays there. It's all like that. It's just a mixed match of everything. So, but most of this is like kind of clay. Most of it's really rocky, and then you can see some shale development in there too. So, but yeah, it's too bad that it's so misunderstood. Then the implementation being introducing myself into the land trust, getting to know the community. Spent the last 7 years doing that while at UT, finishing in my graduate programs. Abandoned mine lands between southern West Virginia and northern Alabama, you're talking about 2+ million acres of abandoned lands. A lot of these lands are very hard to get to. There's not very many open roads to them because once the mines are abandoned, the logging's done, those roads typically are abandoned as well. And so the roads degrade. The soil's very poor here after the AMLs leave. It's unconsolidated mine soils, so there's really no great nutrient value in those soils, and so the trees that get established on these AML sites tend to be there's no logging quality to them, nor even for firewood. They literally become like just trash trees, really. Basically, they fall over very early. They grow about 20 years and they just topple. There'll be a storm blow through and they'll just all fall over. It's just big stands of sweeps of loblolly pine, the pine especially, tend to fall a lot. So you're talking about a vast amount of ecological, sociological, and community damage, which I'm not saying that there wasn't a benefit to those jobs maybe at the time. I'm not, there's a market for coal, and of course Appalachia's poor, so it's what's done. As the coal dries up and as there's no more jobs, these AML sites now offer us a place to build industries. The land is inexpensive often. Often it needs to be remediated or reclaimed. These mine lands are prime soils, meaning though they're tilled to death and they look like junk, once you start adding inoculants or you put microbial life back into them or some kind of carbon or some kind of nitrogen sources, they react very rapidly. So these projects would be very rapid. They don't have to be. They could be remediated very quickly. So. We hope to have these sites back to, people living on them, people growing gardens in the soil, people, living here, and then back to normal living, just like you'd live anywhere else. Roughly, you could be talking per acre, you could have maybe 2 or 3 people per acre, so you'd be 30, 40 people working on 10 acres. That's pretty okay, because we don't automate, so everything we do is hand-picked and has to be managed by hand, and it has to be hand-packed and then delivered by hand, so we'd have to have drivers, and we'd have pickers and planters and people just doing general chores every day too, farm workers, We recycle water, we use solar energy, all these kinds of things. Your production value, you can compete with the biggest corporations. You can go after Foxy, you can go after Sunco, you can go after these huge horticulture industry, and you could probably even tank California eventually because you're water rich here. They're water poor. We're land rich, they're land poor. The other problem is we're super poor. Instead of working for other mines, we could have gone to other AML sites and certainly positioned this project. But the Land Trust offered a community. And a community is the kind of the backbone to what we were thinking about for employing people. Every time we go into an AML site or these abandoned mine lands, around the mine land is a group of people. These people have been here sometimes generations and sometimes not. Sometimes there's just a simple, they've been transplanted by when the coal companies were working or a logging company was still busy. But some people got out when the jobs left. A lot of people don't. Working with the Land Trust has been nice because they've offered us an opportunity to meet people and have a real-time value of introducing the community to the industry and to the project. For the majority of Western Tennessee, it wouldn't mean anything, but for Eastern Tennessee, it'd be immense. All these counties up the North Kentucky line would actually have a viable means to draw grant funding to start these projects like this one. And this is just one project. I'm sure there's a bunch of people with a lot of good ideas who could come out to AML sites if there was funding available. Coming out of UT, there's a lot of young people who would like to get up into AML sites and do either environmental remediation work or reclamation work, or even just social work. Just getting involved in these communities and finding out what's going on up here. If there was a pool of money to put into a grant pool for working at AML again that had real-time values, it wasn't looking at 4-year protracted, funding, it'd be immense. It'd be immense. It'd be, yeah. I mean, it would drive this project forward. We could move on to much more acres and actually build systems and actually people put forward work, soon. Right now, it's very hard to get funding for these things because, horticulture industries on AML sites, you're splitting the difference, right? You're not 100% into agriculture, you're not 100% into environment, so you're kind of dealing with two different grouping funding partners. You're either working out of the USDA group or, Tennessee Department of Agriculture, or you're looking for, EPA grants and, AML grants. But they often don't want to meet in the middle. The ag people don't know much about AML sites, and AML people don't know much about ag. So it's like trying to get those two groups together. It's very hard, but maybe a central funding location, or maybe a central funding pool would maybe make that more facilitated. Maybe those two groups, instead of being so contrary to each other, be like, oh, now there's a pool of funding that we can all draw from and draw big projects up into Appalachia. That's kind of what I hope would be the end result. Oh, yeah, the ARC is awesome. I mean, they're an excellent entity because they're bipartisan supported and they have political clout. Unfortunately, their political clout is driven to huge projects for you're going to rebuild a town. They're talking about $3 million, $2 million investment loads going into major projects. It makes it very hard to go from the $50,000 research side of looking at the grant and then going into their $2 million production grants. If you don't have a team of people to write and work and fill out monthly terms, and so I tell the ARC, if you want things done in Appalachia, you better grease the stone up a little bit because it's too hard to get in. It's too hard. It's too much. It's too much to run big, huge projects, have to work 365, 7 days a week, and then come and kowtow to you guys. We got to go to these conferences. We got to do this. We got to do that. But there's no time for that. We got to be in the trenches. We have to work. You can put your foot down about any moral objective you have, but it's better to put your boots on and get to work and go get something about it. And that's kind of thing where the ARC does a ton of work and they do a lot of litigation and lobbying. But I'm saying that it has to be much more hands-on. You got to get down in here in these communities and make a difference because that's where it seems to be a lacking there. If you want to disconnect, that's a disconnect. It's like from Nashville to here is a big difference. It's not. They don't get here a lot, or ever. Now, in the bigger coal areas like in Harlan, or if you're up in Bell County, where the big strips are, yeah, they go up there. But these old mine sites are what I'm talking about, and where the communities are still somewhat intact. I don't know what to tell the ARC really. It's just, but I appreciate them. It's just, I'd appreciate them more if it was a little more easy to get into, easy access. Tennessee could take on the Reclaim Act and start getting funding from either from the Reclaim Act or for some other proposition that would be put forward to try to tap into some of that the Reclaim funding. Creating these educational job cycles, so that people can come from another industry, say from leaving us being a strip miner running heavy equipment. Where can we find a place for that person in this industry? So do we need heavy equipment operators? Of course we do. So we want to find the people who can do these jobs and put them right to place so they can start making income immediately. Find a value to your day again. It's just it's very forlorn when you've got nothing to do all day and there's no projected way out. There's nothing put forth for you. So if the government wanted to really do something, they'd start working on mechanisms to reach into these communities because they really don't. So I'd like to see a sustained industry. I mean, I'd like to see an industry where not only does the community come here, but more people are coming into this community to work and live. In the heyday of coal production, Clairfield, this area, this valley, I think there was 30,000 people who lived in this between, Egan and here. And now you're talking about maybe, 3,000 people in this whole area. So this area could sustain population. It's just that they have no income. But again, that's not important. The more important thing is getting these people back to work and getting them back on their feet, having some kind of sense of security and a future. Because right now it's this, depression and these kinds of things are, and pandemic areas. So it's like this wildfire. It's very hard to get on your feet. Just building some structure. We build industries to give the community jobs. We would like to build industries that would also be beneficial to carbon sequestration to these AML sites, so we can reestablish soils and hydrologies. They're a bountiful expression of empty land. They're there and no one's touching them, and they're just, often eroding and degrading. You could come in here and start forestry initiatives so that in 100 years you could actually be select cutting trees for veneer wood and for good logging practices, No, I'm not saying go clear cut it again, but I'm saying you could start a real logging practices. You're going to have to imagine all this land being used somehow. Or if it's going to be turned back to nature, you're going to have to seed in the proper trees because it's going to take 340 years otherwise. And I'm saying that fine, 300 years is fine, but that's not really beneficial to anyone in this community. You know, just sitting there looking at trash trees growing forever, you know, they don't get anything out of that. So, but in 100 years, you could build a lot of infrastructure. In this community, I spent a lot of time down the holler over there. There's 300 acres over there that the Hatfields own, and friends with them. So I spent a lot of time down there hiking up in those little acres, and there's up along this ridge, all along back here and all around behind. And I really like it up there. It's never been logged or mined. It's the antithesis. So this side over here was logged, but never mined. This whole side was mined and logged. So really over there is a totally different forest. It's a much different forest to walk in. There's oaks and there's big beech stands. This forest is kind of loblolly pine and sweet gums, some tree of heaven, Bradford pears. There's a lot of invasive escapes, that just settle into this crappy soil. No, I like it over there in the holler. That's a pretty nice spot. And I like to go up in Penroy, up over the other side of the mountain, up over that way. It's really nice. Going up towards Kentucky, it's really nice. And going up into Kentucky is really pretty, going up over the mountains. And then you can come up over the top of 90, going up all the way up the highway, and you can get up to the top of that ridge, and you can look down over all the strips and all the valleys. And you can see all the strips that have been done over the years, and you can see all the logging sites. And it's a picture. I like to take a lot of people up there to look at it because it gives them a good aspect of what this land gets used for and how it gets developed. The most important thing to understand is, for anyone, is that people want to go back to work. We've worked for 7 years up in this community, and I can't think of but maybe 3 people on the top of my hand who have said to us, like, I don't know about that, or we're not interested in coming doing anything like that. I mean, that's 3 people out of 3,000. I mean, all the people we talked to over the years have always been like, can I get a job? When can we start? Can I get this set up? Or can I use some of my land for this? Is there something we can get involved in here? The sheer enthusiasm of the community gives me a lot of hope. They need real faith action. And real faith action comes from people knowing where these communities are, knowing that they're in their district, knowing what the community needs. But as far as I know, I mean, not many people even know about people in Appalachia. It's a very unspoken group of people, and they're very disenfranchised from the people, the communities around them. Knoxville's an hour away, and it might as well be light years away. It's very profound, to me, to leave Knoxville in the morning and have breakfast in there, and then come up here and then meet people who really just don't have breakfast. And I think that's a pretty telling story for me. So I think if I had anything to say to anyone, it'd be, yeah, there's no point not funding it, because what are you going to do to it? Let it just rot, or are you going to let them strip it down to nothing? Because they won't. There's no coal left. So what are you going to do? You can't. You bitch about the crime all the time. Everyone wants to moan and crime, poverty. No one's getting educated, and then they don't do anything about it. So it's empty. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at.